So in this closing panel of the C40 World Mayors Summit, we will now hear activists and mayors discuss together with each other what we can do to put our words and ideas into action. Mobilization is a prerequisite, yes, but how to translate all that involvement into specific political and societal action. That's what we're going to discuss now. Please join me up here in the chairs. Angela Valenzuela of Fridays for Future, Santiago. And please. Anton Walker, Speaker of the Copenhagen Youth Council. Antônio Carlos de Magalhães, Neto, Mayor of Salvador. And May Boeve, Executive Director, 350.org. And Yvonne Aki-Sawyerr, Mayor of Freetown, actually another new members of the C40 cities. Welcome up here. And it seems that C40 ran out of moderators, so I have to do the moderating for this part. Welcome all of you up here.
Thank you.
And I wanted to start with you, May, because I know that 350.org, you have been playing a really crucial role in sort of really getting this mobilization going. But now when the theme for this conversation is sort of how do we link between the mobilization and then to the action part. What is your thoughts about sort of the next chapter of all this mobilization?
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you to C40 and to the youth leaders who are here in the audience and to the many mayors and all of you and all of the work that has happened. And I want to specifically thank the work that's happened in this room to embrace a global Green New Deal and what a game changer it is for this community to link climate justice, economic and social justice. It's an extraordinary achievement and step forward, and it's part of how we link the movements on the inside and the outside. I want to thank the people in this room who are part of the Divest Invest Forum and who are following the money and figuring out how do we make sure that those who are causing climate change are held accountable. And finally, I want to thank those in the room who are part of this exciting new youth initiative that I've just heard about. So there's a lot of energy in this room. But to answer your question, Connie, we all know that there is a gap remaining between the evident, abundant leadership and the warpath that the fossil fuel industry is on to continue extracting. And I think the distance in between those two spaces is simple. It's political courage. And that is what the climate emergency calls on all of us to do, to take absolutely every decision that we face with the utmost political courage. That is what young people are calling on us to do by their very example. And that is what our next speaker, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has made abundantly evident in my country, the United States. So that, we believe, is the next move. And it takes many forms. It takes work to stop fossil fuels on the ground. It takes work to divest. It takes work to get to 100% clean energy. But all of that requires political courage in this moment. And that is what is going to enable us to link the incredible movements on the streets, larger than we've ever seen, to what has to happen inside the decision-making halls.
Thank you so much. Anton, representing the Copenhagen Youth Council, you have worked with the city of Copenhagen, and we have heard a lot during these days about what's going on there. But seen from a young perspective, really wanting to do something, and then suddenly meeting this sort of system of politics, try and tell us about how do you see that, and how do you feel that that is being received when you go into that room where also the specific policies are being prepared?
Well, I think definitely it's this whole political system and the unwillingness to do stuff sort of politically is incredibly depressing. And I think it's something that the mayors here with the Green New Deal are showing, that maybe they're willing to sort of, break with a little bit, and like to making sure that for them that they're going to do something. And I think that's incredibly courageous. But I think it's really important that, for instance, this Green New Deal, that it becomes action, and that it becomes specific policy all over the world in all the respective cities. And yeah, I think it's incredibly positive being here. In regards to Copenhagen, we do a lot of political work, and it's true that often when we have an idea or we have a policy suggestion, it takes a long time for the entire political system, like even to just see what we've done and to hear what we're doing, which is incredibly frustrating, and often it doesn't even work out. But I'm hoping that from the end of this meeting, we can begin looking forward, and we'll work together even more than we have been doing.
Have you maybe a good example where it did work out?
Yeah, well, we're the Copenhagen Youth Council, and every year we have 4 policy suggestions that we can make to the politicians, our local politicians. So obviously that's not only climate stuff. We've worked with climate this year, but the year before we did a lot of really good things. We were trying to sort of make these like ambulances for psychologically, what's it called, like young people who have psychological problems, that they could call this number, and then they'd get some emergency help. And actually that was really well received, and that's one of the ideas that we're really proud of having done. It's not to do with climate change, but still.
Okay. Before I go to the mayors, Angela, I would like to know from you, because you're one of 8 people on the coordinating team for Fridays for Future in Santiago.
Yes.
And it would be nice to hear from you what your experience has been like, but also if you could sort of tell about what is the specific demands and goals that you have presented to the authorities?
Okay. So it's beautiful, because before getting involved with Fridays for Future, I was dreaming to find a platform where I could meet people who are working and trying to push for action, for climate action. And I didn't want to feel lonely. And I knew that somewhere that people was also caring about what I was feeling. So this emotion, I didn't feel it more in isolation, but I found a network of people that at the beginning, yes, it started with like 8 people, then like mass mobilizations, and now it's been beautiful this week to meet people from Fridays for Future from all over the world, and we're really like a global network, and I'm deeply thankful for everyone. It's been deeply inspiring to meet you, and I'm gonna take you home and just tell everyone that yes, it's real, we are a global movement, and there is hope because we are the source of hope. And that's exactly what I was looking for when I decided to participate in Fridays for Future. I needed to feel not only fearful for my future, but to feel powerful, and that we could have this collective power to influence the local decisions and the global decisions on climate. And now, just talking more specifically about your question, what we are demanding. Well, as you know...
Okay, now comes a long list.
Yeah, I'll try to sum it up. But you know that in Santiago this year, at the end of the year, we have one of the most important conferences for the climate, the COP25. And globally, this has been seen for Chile as like a big challenge, and they are taking this leadership as a government. But sadly, at the local level, we are not experiencing the same ambition. So that's why we are demanding, as Fridays for Future, not only Santiago, but Fridays for Future Chile and the whole civil society movement, that we can put an end soon, by 2030, to all coal plants in the country. Just to give you... just to give you an idea of the lack of ambition, that is not just from this last government, but it's something that's happened throughout the years. Even though Chile is part of the Climate Convention on the UNFCCC, over the last 10 years, we have created 14 new coal plants, and the last one was inaugurated this year. And what that means for local communities, we have something called sacrifice zones. And what that means is that basically people are forced to live right next to coal plants. And I visited one of the sacrifice zones 3 weeks ago, and I met two beautiful people. I would like to share a little bit about them. One of them was a fisherman from Ventanas. And he told me that once he used to be able to fish, and that was like their local economy. They would sell their fish, and that's how everything worked. But now, with all the pollution, he cannot sell this fish anymore. So actually, the fishermen now are being hired by the same fossil fuel industry to go down into the shore and pick up coal, and that is drifted away in low tide. So as sad and terrible as it sounds now, the fisherman is getting coal out of the ocean. And this is absolutely unacceptable. Another very important person I met was Cata Alonso. And this is one of the most vocal and great leaders from Ventanas. She's been fighting for her community for years to stop the expansion of coal plants. I met with her and she showed me around. She will point out the 5 coal plants that are just meters away from her community. And it's very powerful because just this week I found out that she received a threat. She was told that her house will be set on fire if she continued talking, and she will have to be the first one to leave Ventanas. And this is not an isolated example of violence in Latin America. We have the highest rates of violence and murder for environmental defenders and human rights defenders. So I just wanted to share that with you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Angela. Antônio, Neto, as mayor of Salvador, you sit there and you have the responsibility to cope with all sorts of demands from citizens. And we know that many in the room will know it's not just about climate, it's a job about numerous and really, really many things. How are you coping with this increasing awareness and pressure, for instance, among young people? How are you handling that in your position as mayor?
Bom, a satisfação participar.
It's a pleasure to be part of this event. I feel that the first thing that has to be explained here is that you have politicians and politicians. You cannot generalize. We, today in Brazil, are going through a challenge because undoubtedly the signals that are being sent by the federal government at the international level are provoking a lot of questioning and doubts around the commitment of the country towards the climate agenda. We understand that we have we see our function as vital. A couple weeks ago, Salvador held the UN climate conference for the UN against the federal government. But we know that there are many political leaders in Brazil who are committed, who are concerned about the environment agenda. And more than that, we could see how important it is for the local government to take charge. Because on one side, we have to think globally, yes, but it is fundamental that the execution is in the hands of the local politicians and authorities. And it is possible because we should not rest on the excuse that there is no money. we have a lot of priorities, but we have to have investment infrastructure and investment with environment, because we also have to think of public services, particularly in countries like Brazil. My city has 3 million inhabitants, which is characterized by a lot of inequality. We have a lot of poverty, social inequality. The city of Salvador, 7 years ago, did not address any resilience and mitigation policies derived from climate changes. A city that wasn't culturally prepared to face those challenges. And what we can see is that little by little we are changing that reality, showing that it's possible to combine addressing a series of priorities and demands from the society with the climate agenda. And more than that, the authorities have to be on the side of society. It's extremely important that streets are alive. The young people have to mobilize. Why? Because we are going to see a lot of authorities that today are not sensible to that. And this has to be imposed through the people. They have to pressure the authorities. And we have to understand that if we are on the same side of the table, hand in hand, public authorities, those who have to govern with society, we can have a very different future for our planet.
Thank you so much also for this very clear recognition that actually it helps when the citizens get out there and make themselves heard. I would like to go to the mayor of Freetown, because I know you have also been working, among other things, to mobilize young people in your community. Try and give us an insight as to how you are sort of balancing between these different interests. And when you have the activists going there and you have to take the decisions, how are you using the mobilization?
Thank you very much. And can I just start off by saying thank you to the board of C40s for approving me as a C40 member today. I'm really thrilled. As a city, we're totally committed to the ideals of C40. And I'm here today as a mayor. Exactly 1 year and 5 months ago, I was sworn in. And I came into this role purely because of the environment, not from a political background, not from a public service background, because of a deep concern for where we're going with the environment. In terms of how we're managing this, I was really interested to hear what the mayor of Salvador said in terms of adaptation. So very often over the last couple of days, people have said to me, you know, how are your young people mobilizing? And the reality is best summed up by the submission that Hilda from Uganda made in the press conference just a few minutes ago, when through tears, she very, very deeply, sincerely communicated to us her reality, the loss of her family land and home and schooling because of climate events. Our young people typically are consumed by survival. They're consumed by getting through the challenges which extreme temperatures have created, which have led to more rural migration. They're consumed by dealing with the events or the impact of the flood events, of the extreme weather conditions. So the mobilization that they do is not in the way that Fridays for Future is done. But it's just as important. And from my perspective, with this platform, I think it's so important for us all to not only be thinking about the emissions and cutting them down, but recognizing that because, as the mayor of Salvador said, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nothing was done about adaptation, and frankly, not much was done about stopping the emissions. Here we are today, we've also got to, at the same time as we talk about stopping emissions, we've got to recognize that there are millions of people whose lives are now at risk, whose livelihoods are now at risk, whose children's future is very much in doubt. So our dual path has to be dealing with the emission reduction, but also that divest, invest has got to be about adaptation, has got to be about investing in those communities, principally in the global south, but not exclusively. So when we talk about activism, with Women for Climate, just in August, and it was poignant because on the 14th of August, we launched the Women for Climate Mentorship Program, inviting and creating a platform, working with Mayor Hedegaard and her team, creating a platform for young women, or any women really, to join us, and we support them in coming up with climate solutions. The very next day, we had one of those extreme weather conditions. There was a terrible flood, and young people, in fact, the 4 people who died were all under the age of 22.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And also thank you very much for reminding us that people in politics, they do not come out of the blue. They are not born like people who don't care about a thing. They actually often are going into politics because they are exactly interested in making an improvement in society. So thank you very much for reminding us that. Maybe I thought there is sort of a contradiction somehow between being the activist, going out there, saying what you want, and having your cause. And then the reality that sometimes change takes time. Politics and decisions takes time. And many of us are impatient. But how can we sort of build a bridge between these things so that we will not end up in a lot of frustrated young people and other people being frustrated because things are not happening as fast as they should? How can we sort of align these things? What needs to be changed where? I know it's a big question, but I think it's quite important because I could fear that we would soon see some kind of frustrated polarization. What is your thinking about that?
Well, I think we have a lot of examples of where mass movements have helped create the political conditions for political decisions to take place. And it's when those two forces are able to work in alignment with each other that we see not only the most aggressive and ambitious policies being taken, but we also see the movement get strengthened. And we see examples of this in the recent decision just today in Brazil for 4 oil blocks to be stopped from being permitted in a coral reef area. This was an example of an activist movement that mobilized in these hearings, and the decision was taken not to do it, and the decision was credited to the work of the activists in pushing them to do it. And when we see examples like this, it helps both sides, because it helps those of us who are trying to create political space and those, most of you in this room, who are walking through it and who are helping guide these visionary agendas. So I think it's so important in this moment. The next few years are so crucially important that our starting point not be a dichotomy between what has to happen and what can happen, but a commitment to the vision of what is required, and that all of us are actually partners in getting there together, because that's what is happening on the streets right now. That is the call for action. And some people ask, oh, well, the message isn't really clear. I don't really know what's being asked for. How many people in this room are confused about what is being demanded by young people? I thought so. We all understand what has to be taken into account. We all understand what the science is saying. We all understand what the demands of climate justice require. And so it's up to all of us to be creative. And of course, it's going to be challenging, but we have to keep our commitment to that possibility. Otherwise, this is exactly what the fossil fuel industry wants us to do. They want us to be caught in a fight amongst each other about ambition versus reality. And it's our job to not give in to that false dichotomy and fight for what's right.
Mayor Neto, could I ask you to sort of comment on what we just heard here, the same problem?
Bom, de fato,
Indeed, timing is not always met with the same urgency by the authorities. But I'd like to add something to your presentation that for me is very important. In this enormous planet, we have very diverse situations in different countries, especially when you compare a rich country and a poor country. In the poorer countries, we cannot close our eyes to discussing financing. For example, the renewal of the public transportation fleet, one of the greatest pollutants in Latin America, and doubtlessly in the case of Brazil. It's impossible to renew the fleet of public transport, replacing that with e-buses, unless we discuss financing. And this financing, many times, is not only limited to the country. It has to be a greater debate beyond the boundaries. When we talk about implementing resilience plans, we do have a resilient plan that is quite ambitious for Salvador, and we wish Salvador to be carbon neutral by 2049, when Salvador becomes 500 years old. But we need to act fast, because society wants us to act fast. But to do that, we need resources. And the authorities don't have the resources all the time. So this is why it's essential that we keep in mind that the debate on financing has to be global. It has to be global.
And Mayor Aki-Sawyerr, if you should point to sort of one barrier that you see from your office as a mayor for speeding up action, where does that lie?
I would say the financing point is a really important one, but I think another issue is information. One of the things which has been so striking over the course of the last few days is how much I've learned. And I think my view is that the movement that we see here in the West has been fueled by information, by people understanding better and more. And today, when the young people were in the press conference, what they said was they wanted more information out there. A barrier to change is when people don't feel the sense of urgency. And often that is because they don't understand. And it's not just a question of putting the facts and figures out there in a context that relates to the West, but breaking it down so it relates to somebody in Ecuador, it relates to somebody in Bangladesh, it relates to somebody in Freetown. So I would say that and even that requires financing. You know, our campaigns to get the message out, our campaigns to build in resilience, our campaigns to actually do the work required is going to take financing. We also have political will issues and challenges between national and local governments and where mandates state. I've been committed from the very first day I got into office to wanting to put a ban on single-use plastic. I haven't been able to do so because it's not my mandate. And I'm needing to negotiate and engage with central government to get that done. And I know this is true of many other mayors in their situations, maybe for different issues. So that's also, so I would say around that, the role of the public in getting that information helps put the pressure on the central government and indeed even on subnational governments who aren't really getting the message. So financing, information, and the relationship between that and the citizens.
Very clear messages. Thanks a lot for that. Here in conclusion, I would like each of you, just 20 seconds or so, come up with sort of your wish. Namely, for the young people here up, our activists, to think about if you had one wish for mayors to take home, what would that be? And we would start with the mayors. If you had one wish the other way around, what would your number one wish be? Let's start with Mayor Neto, and I will come to you also, but Mayor Neto.
Bom,
Well, my main wish with regard to the youth is that they do not lose hope, do not cease to believe. They have to know that they are the main actors of transformation of our present. And this connected world, in this connected world, the future of the world, its balance and sustainability will depend on the activism and the presence and energy of the young people. Depends on them.
And Boeve?
I would say political courage, and I would point out that the word for courage comes from the word for heart. And we all know the decisions we would take if we weren't afraid. The most important things that we could do in our organizations, in our cities, in our youth movements. Those are the steps we all have to be taking. That's my wish.
And Yvonne, Aki-Sawyerr?
My wish would be that the youth no longer have to feel that they're in this on their own. And as so many of them have said over the last few days, they feel scared about their future. And that will happen when we join the dots. We need the dots to be joined. Around the world, there are many people who feel this way. The stronger we are together, the closer we are together, the more effective we will be in making the difference that has to happen now.
Thank you. And Anton, your wish number one to the mayors of the world.
I hope that when you go back home today or tomorrow, that you start listening to young people and that you take us seriously. I think that's really important. It's not about what you have done or what should have been done, but please listen to us, because in that way, maybe we won't be able to believe it, but at least we can hope that change will come.
Thank you so much. And the last word goes to you, Angela, your best wish.
Take bold and inclusive climate action, and Fridays for Future is going to back you up. It's going to build the political momentum for you to do everything. And again, yeah, that's it.
That concludes this panel up here. I think very, very clear 5 wishes. Don't lose hope. More political courage, please. You are not alone. The dots must be joined. Please start listening and take the young people seriously and come up with bold and inclusive solutions. Thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.